fucking boring like week and a half, man. The draft can't get here soon enough. So it should be popping up for us.
Yeah, I see it on YouTube.
It literally caught my F word. That was the first word on the live stream, was me dropping an F-bomb.
That happens.
All right, now I just want to make sure. Let's see. Yep, we're live. We're live. All right. For those of you that are or will be joining in, this is the Titletown podcast, the first episode of the rebranded Titletown podcast. Of course, your host, Rhino and Brandon. We are waiting on our guest of the week, Bart Winkler from 12:50 a.m. out of Milwaukee, the Bart Winkler Show. He is the host. You might have remembered a couple weeks ago we had Ryan Horvat on. He has been on the Bart Winkler Show as well. So we were pretty excited to have him on today. We'll be discussing a slew of things: the draft and develop philosophy, Sterling Sharp and Leroy Butler in the draft, and of course, Joe Barry expectations. So we're just going to hang out and rant and rave a little bit for about 9 minutes, let some viewers get in here, and then we'll jump into the show once Bart joins.
My mom drops the first comment. Hi, Mom.
Oh, that was your mom?
Yeah, my mom's Lisa. Thanks for tuning in, Mom.
Hi, Lisa.
She's probably got it on her TV. She had it on our last show. She had it on her TV.
I know my girlfriend and her daughter are probably already tuned in, so they'll be dropping a comment as well. They're actually right in the other room over here.
That's awesome.
I kicked them out of the man cave when I started recording, so I didn't want to have 4 sets of eyes, dead set on me as I was recording.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I did that. I was doing the intro and outro for my Brew City Lounge, and my girlfriend was sitting here watching me. I was like, I can't right now. Go.
Lisa, since you're watching, is my volume level okay? I got a new setup, so give me the thumbs up if I sound all right. We'll wait for the thumbs up. Yeah, I get a little nervous when I'm trying to record, so having eyes deadlocked.
It's
on
so
you.
weird because
yeah.
It's easy. It's almost easier to go live and just go with it, and then when you record and stop, you're like, okay. Like it literally took me like 30 tries to get my intro and outro done. She gave you a thumbs up, so we're good to go.
Thumbs up. Thanks, Mom. And of course, Noah has
thumbs up as well.
You had to do this. You had to do this right when I started recording. Hurry, go, hurry. Now the dog's got to come out, and I've got one dog that just cannot, for the life of her, mind her own business. Anything that moves. What's that?
Oh, there's noise. I hear it in here. Let's go look what's in here.
We've got a couple of viewers just to catch you up if you are just joining the live stream. We're just kind of hanging out in here. We do this every week just to get about 10 minutes before we start recording, just to make sure we have no technical difficulties. Once again, we're waiting on our guest of the week, Bart Winkler from 12:50 a.m. Awesome guy. Him and I have shared a lot of the same viewpoints on Twitter, kind of have gone back and forth with other Packers fans in Twitter battles. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he has in terms of the draft and develop philosophy. I know he's probably going to touch on the Jordan Love draft pick. He's going to touch on the Jordan Love draft pick. He also, I believe Bart is a huge proponent of Leroy Butler being in the Hall of Fame. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say about that as well.
And he's got direct ties with him. Leroy Butler works at the same radio station.
Yep.
So
who is on that show with him?
So it's the Wendy's Big Show, 10 to 2. It's Sparky.
Sparky, that's right.
Then former Badger, former Packer, Gary Ellerson.
I knew Gary was on there with them. I couldn't remember who the third guy was.
And then they have their producers, I think, kind of change every now and then. But that's the majority of who was on there. their show. And
Have you tried some of that Leap brand vodka?
haven't opened it yet.
Haven't opened it yet. All right.
I got
I
the
heard
auto- I got the autograph bottle at Pick and Save. I haven't opened it though.
I probably wouldn't end up opening that one.
I'm gonna keep the autograph one.
Yeah. I heard it's extremely good though.
That's what I've heard. That's what I've heard. Yeah. This would have been a perfect show for Leroy, for Bart to get Leroy to jump on with us.
I'm gonna have to reach out to Leroy, see if we can get Leroy on here. Because if so, they're obviously gonna all have to have like a gimlet or something of his recording. 5 minutes to the hour. Like I said, just keeping those of you who are joining in updated. We're just waiting on Bart. Like I said, we like to get on here a couple minutes early, make sure our audio levels are good, make sure we have no technical difficulties. So we're just hanging out, me and Brandon. It is a gloomy Sunday.
Sunny over here.
Is it really?
Yeah, it kind of surprised me this morning. I thought it was supposed to be rainy.
Well, rain is coming because it's raining here in Madison.
And then it's probably coming then.
We went to breakfast at about 8:15. We left the house and it had just got done pouring, and it was kind of just like misting, sprinkling, but it was chilly.
It has like I was telling this to my girlfriend the other day. It kind of has like a fall feeling lately.
It does. It's that post, like that first heat wave, where it drops back down to the normal temperatures. So I think the weather next week is supposed to be average as opposed to in the 70s like it was last week, which is all right. I mean, mid 50s is okay for this time of year. It's better than snow.
I was going to say, I'll take it over what we've had before.
No kidding.
Works for me. Whatever gets me on the lake.
Exactly. Quick shout out to everybody who is following the live stream right now. We have a great episode coming up, so we're pretty excited about that. Stay tuned for some great conversation. I'm digging this new mic, man.
It looks good.
Yeah. They make a pop filter specifically to go around it, so I'm gonna have to pick that up.
I'm gonna have to get a mic. This is way off topic, but pretty soon here to travel because we're taking Bruce City on site soon.
They make some good traveling mics. There's actually one, I believe it's called the either the Missile or the Rocket or something like that at Best Buy, where it unfolds into a little stand.
Yeah, that's cool.
So you can plug it into your laptop and just have it right there. And I believe the distance that you have to be from it is actually pretty good.
That's nice.
So that would be a decent one to check out.
Yeah, definitely. I will.
I got this one for Best Buy.
That's usually where I get all my audio stuff.
And the webcam that I have is you can take that with you. It's just a USB webcam, and it mounts. So mine mounts to the top of the screen. So if I had to record on my laptop, I could unplug it, put it on my laptop, and just put it right on top of the screen, and it's full HD. That's why I look so gorgeous.
Is that why?
I'll send him a quick DM and see if we can get him in here.
You guys are just jumping on. Good afternoon. Happy Sunday. If you're not on Facebook, on our fan page, please show us some love. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up, follow Titletown Lounge. Also on Twitter at Titletown Lounge. Any and all love is greatly, greatly appreciated. And we do appreciate the support that you guys have shown us thus far. And we're super excited to be in the Lounge Room Network now and look for big things that come in the near future. And it's exciting time for sure.
Also look for cross podcasting. Obviously Brandon is on the Brew City Lounge. He's on the Titletown Lounge. He has appeared on the On Point discussion. And I'm sure there will be other pods that he will guest appear on, as well as myself. So make sure you're subscribing to the Lounge Room Network Twitter page so you can see all of the podcasts that we have available. We've got a Alabama football podcast, a draft podcast, obviously the political and social conversation podcast, Packers, Brewers and Bucks, Cubs. So we're getting off our feet here and really getting rolling with the network. It's pretty exciting times.
Really excited. Super stoked.
We will begin the show momentarily. And you know what sounds really good right now? It's a good ballpark hot dog. Holy crap. I don't know why I'm craving that right now.
Our buddy Juan's down there, I think, in Chicago today.
At Comiskey, I refuse to call it whatever else its name is.
Gateway or Gate something or guaranteed. That's it.
Guaranteed rate.
Yeah.
Guaranteed rate. Yeah.
When did that must be new to me. I don't know.
Well, there was something after Comiskey Field, and I can't remember. Wasn't it US Cellular Field?
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah, it was.
And I think just recently over the last year or two, it is, by the way, condolences to Juan. He couldn't join us today. There he is. There is Mr. Bart. What's going on, bud?
What's up, dudes?
Are we ready to roll?
Yeah, if you are, I am.
All right. I'm going to hit record here and then we will get going.
Adam drops in a comment. Morning, Adam. Thanks for joining, buddy. Our good buddy, Amma. Adam, follow his Twitter and his podcast, Bama Lounge, for sure.
All right, guys, welcome to the Titletown Lounge podcast. I am Rhino Alberts. You can find me on Twitter at Sports Talk Rhino. I'm joined by my co-host, Brandon. You can find him on Twitter at Wisco_Brandon. And of course, today we are joined by our special guest, Bart Winkler. You can find him on Twitter at WinksThinks. Bart, what's going on, bud?
How you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. Excited to have you. Excited to have you. It's a gloomy day in Madison. I know it's a little sunny out by you guys, but I woke up to about 49 degrees and rain. So it's not a bad day to kick off a podcast on the couch or wherever. You look like you might be in the basement.
Yeah, I'm in a hostage video is where I am.
Are you in your safe room right now?
I don't know. It's a great spot for a man cave. I just haven't done anything to it, but I put up a plastic one, so I'm in the spirit.
Bart, by the way, is on 1250 AM out of Milwaukee. You can find him on the Bart Winkler Show. We had his one of his reoccurring co-hosts on the podcast a couple weeks ago, Ryan Horvat. So also exciting to have Bart on the show as well. Bart, we're going to kick off the podcast today. Our first segment is going to be the draft and develop philosophy that Green Bay has with pretty much the last 20 years worth of draft picks. I know you and I have engaged in quite a few conversations when it comes to this particular philosophy that Green Bay has. What are your thoughts on the way Green Bay goes about drafting in that particular philosophy of not necessarily drafting for need, but drafting for the future?
I think their whole philosophy of draft and develop and sustain success is overall a good one. You know, and the problem is when you do that, you're assuming that in this philosophy, you will win a Super Bowl maybe once I guess what they've done every 15 years or so. They're winning a Super Bowl. They won the one with Favre in 96. I don't have to tell you guys this. They won with Rodgers. So they are winning some. With the way that they've been in the regular season, you would think they should probably win more. I mean, this is a team that's consistently at the top of their conference, rolling through the NFC North with ease relatively over the last 30 years. Their problem is they're kind of like, they're always, so there's one team that's going to win, and then there's a team that's going to take second. And this philosophy is going to consistently put you into second. And that should be good. But it's these other teams that are ahead of them, and they're doing things randomly. Like the Buccaneers were 15th in the conference, 12th, terrible. And then they get Tom Brady, they build a team, and now they win a Super Bowl. And then if you look at their history since Favre, the Buccaneers were up in Dungy years and then really bad and useless for 10, 15 years. And then they get Brady and they win another one. So if you're looking back at the 30 years of both franchises, you see that the Green Bay Packers have won 2 Super Bowls and have been good the rest of the time. And the Buccaneers have won 2 Super Bowls and relatively been bad. But where the Packers are with this draft and develop philosophy, they're starting ahead in the race every time. It's just they're never able to consistently win. There's other teams that if they go all in for a year or two, if they have, Eli Manning to get 2 titles, there's other teams doing other things, and the draft and develop philosophy should get you cracks at it. It's just that the Packers, I think, when you look at the way they've attacked this, this philosophy, and then the results, their MO should have gotten them more results. If this is a team that's going to be sustained success and 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks and consistently thinking the future while thinking of the present, you should have, over the course of the last 30 years, more than 2 Super Bowls. So it is a good philosophy. The problem is other teams' philosophies are also knocking you away. So sometimes you have to adjust the philosophy a little bit. Like for Aaron Rodgers to be the quarterback and then for Jordan Love to be drafted in the first round that you traded up for, giving up another asset in the 4th round, at some point you gotta realize, like, while we want to be good in the future, these moments that we have, these possibilities that we have here, we also have to strike here. Otherwise, another team is just gonna, Tom Brady us. So if the goal is to always be good and to always have a shot, well, then the Packers are one of the best ever. If the goal is Super Bowl, well, then everybody's got their shot at it, and the Packers aren't really doing anything more special than anybody else. Good philosophy has not worked as much as I think it should have with the outcomes.
And it seems like one of the missing components with this particular philosophy, one way that they could have made it perhaps more successful, is being a little bit more aggressive in free agency. If you're going to have an entire draft where you're not planning on drafting for need, you're planning on drafting for the best available. There have been multiple scenarios where the Packers could have gone out and maybe filled those gaps with free agency. I'm not saying go out and get the OBJs and the JJ Watts and stuff like that, but it really seems that it's the same scenario with free agency as it is with a Super Bowl victory. It's like once every 10 years, they make a splash in free agency. Brandon, what are your thoughts on the philosophy of draft and develop and the lack of real free agency moves when you're drafting with that philosophy?
While Brandon shares, I am going to move my screen because backlight is a big no-no.
First off, Bart, thanks for jumping on. I know you got a real busy schedule, so we appreciate you jumping on. And I kind of want to echo a lot of what Bart was saying. I know Bart's a huge Jordan Love fan. Wink, wink. But all jokes aside, it does work. But what determines the success and the failure of the draft philosophy? And if you go back and you look at probably 20 years, honestly, outside of a few of those draft classes, they really haven't drafted really all that well. They've hit on a lot of pieces, Rodgers, Bakhtiari, Jair, Aaron Jones, Clark Adams, and a couple of those are probably the best at their position in the NFL. But outside of those, when they strike really good. And when they don't strike, they completely strike out. I mean, it's really bad. So if you're going to have the philosophy of drafting and developing, it has to be a consistent, drafting. I know draft's kind of a crapshoot, but when you do draft and develop, you have to have some consistency of good drafts. You can't. 2015, I don't think anybody is on the team anymore from that draft class. 2012, they're horrible draft classes. And when you do hit, and the Packers have shown that they can draft and develop. Corey Linsley's now a free agent. I think he's the highest paid center in the league. He was drafted in the 5th round. Elton Jenkins, Bakhtiari. They know what they're doing with those high picks and with those even the later rounds. But it seems like, okay, you get a good draft class, or you over 10 years, you get a handful of really good players in your draft. What's that next step besides draft and developing? You see other teams that are drafting very well. Kansas City's drafted very well. What do they do outside of that? They dip into free agency. They grab other players, key pieces, missing holes. This team has a lot of holes on their team. And when you're drafting replacements in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, your translation to success isn't going to be very smooth. So although it does work to a certain extent, and take out the division, because the division is not what we want in Green Bay. It's called Titletown for a reason. We want titles. And when you have the best quarterback to ever play the game in Aaron Rodgers, one title is not enough. And that may sound, entitled, a play on words, a little bit of entitled town, but you got the best quarterback to ever play, and you have one championship. and you still, you look back and you look at the Ted Thompson and even Brian Gutekunst, you're like, well, our philosophy is to draft and develop and fill in holes every year in the draft. Okay, that's great. What are your opponents doing? What is Tampa Bay doing? What is Kansas City doing? New Orleans. I mean, what are these teams doing? They're drafting too. They're developing as well. They're going out and grabbing pieces. So it works. Like Bart said, it works, but there's got to be something on top of that. You can't always rely on a 6-round safety to cover Julio Jones in an NFC Championship game. I know he wasn't a safety, cornerback, Ladarius Gunter. I don't even think he was drafted, but there's got to be something on top of it. Drafting and develop is a core of the franchise. That's great. Add on top of it, get the pieces every year that you need. You're not going to ever see another Aaron Rodgers. And you have to, when you have him, you have to take advantage of it.
Well, I want to jump on that too, because when you're on, the level that the Packers are, and they do draft well, and they also draft terrible. That is a good way to put it. When they hit, they hit. And so when you're over the course of 20 years, I mean, look at this offseason, for example. You draft these guys that you do hit on. Kenny Clark, well, you got to bring him back. I mean, he's so good. Devontae Adams, you're going to have to bring him back. Jair, you're going to have to bring him back. And then there's guys that you can't afford, like Corey Linsley, and somehow they were able to bring Aaron Jones back. So you're drafting guys that are good, and you keep them. And then that's a lot of money tied up into those guys. But again, you have to keep them. So even if you're, again, I think where the Packers need to change it up a little bit is they're consistently trying to stay on this line when somebody's always going to jump them. So the line that I've referenced of being like second best, unless, even if you look at the Super Bowl year with Rodgers, there was a lot of luck that went into that. They've had better teams that have not made a Super Bowl. So they're almost banking on that as part of the baked in recipe. When you're the Packers like this, you have to understand when is a time to strike, and then there might be a time to go down. Like, not every year you're going to win the Super Bowl. Totally understand, totally get it. Last year, you were a game away, and what did you do in the offseason? You did little to nothing. This year, an interesting strategy. They're running it back, which I think, all right, them and Tampa, the two best teams, they're both running it back to a degree. But the Packers are running it back with, so Aaron Jones, good. Okay, they're running it back with those guys, but they're running it back with like Will Redmonds and Shannon Sullivan's. Like, there's got to be some cornerback who just signed with the Panthers. AJ Boye, that wasn't for a lot of money. Somebody else went. I think Malcolm Butler signed dirt cheap.
There's a handful of cornerbacks still out there as well.
Like, at some point, Malcolm Butler, even at this age, or AJ Bouye, the Logan Ryans, this group, you can't give the advantage to Shannon Sullivan and Will Redmond because they're here. That's not an advantage. They're not better. So that's where the Packers need to adjust a little bit. I appreciate them. I mean, it seems like they're trying to win, but there's always a little more they could do. I'm not asking them to go trade, for Odell Beckham. I'm not asking them to sign guys they can't afford. There's always a little more they can do, and it's just they think that they can. And now on top of this, you got this whole, do we want Rodgers here? I guess we'll find out. Like, they're being all weird about it, and that's not healthy either. I don't even know if they know, and they're trying to make us, fight about it all the time and stuff. So I don't know. There's always a little more they can do. The results matter. And if you look back at the last 30 years, it's nice to have 2 Super Bowls. Talk to any other franchise that doesn't. It's nice to have. If you look at the other teams that do have 2 Super Bowls, the Packers have done it better, but to what result? The Giants. Have they done it better than the Giants? Yeah, same amount of Super Bowls. Have they done it better than the Buccaneers? Same amount of Super Bowls. So when you look at it that way, is their way really better? It depends what you're asking for. If you just want to have 10-win seasons and have a miserable playoff experience, Green Bay is the team for you. If you want to know that you're going to have a team that's going to go all in once in a while, that's not happening around here.
See, I think with the draft and develop philosophy, you can walk a tight line with both drafting to develop and drafting for now. Last year's draft was the perfect example of what they could have done and what they didn't ultimately end up doing. They were in the NFC Championship game and they got blown out by the San Francisco 49ers. So they had a team that was good enough to compete, obviously, because they were there. And what they do in the first 2 rounds, they took 2 positions that they ultimately did not need. Fast forward 1 year forward, they're in the NFC Championship game, and it's not even 1 game away. I mean, they're about 3 or 4 plays away from the Super Bowl. So what did they do in free agency? They didn't excel. They didn't take that step to get, better than Tampa Bay, to get better than Kansas City. They ultimately remained the same. So this year would be the year to draft for the now. Don't draft and develop, draft for the now. If you're not going to go all in with free agency, go all in on the draft. They could have done that last year. I mean, Jordan Love didn't even suit for one game all season. He was in street clothes all 16 games. You mean to tell me that they couldn't have found somebody in the first round to contribute anything? 1 play would have been more of a contribution than what Jordan Love gave to the franchise. So instead of taking somebody you don't need and you want to develop, maybe in the first couple rounds, take somebody that could make an impact on day 1. Take a starting quarterback, take a starting interior defensive lineman, allow that player to push your team forward to get to that point where you can beat the Tampa Bays, you can beat the Kansas Cities. And then later on in the draft, pick a couple guys that you can develop into starters later on down the road.
Yeah, and I
mean,
agree.
They must have really loved Jordan Love. It's kind of been my shtick now that I'm always talking about Jordan Love, but he didn't play a snap, and he could end up being, Joe Montana part 2. Fine. You had an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. That whatever Jordan Love does, they had an opportunity to win a Super Bowl. And so I feel like he's got to at least win 1 to make up for the one that they could have won. If Bakhtiari's healthy, I think they win. You mentioned so one thing that bothers me is, well, tell me the 4 plays or tell me 1 play where a first round pick would have helped in that. You don't know. Equanimous dropped a 2-point conversion, but you don't know. The game scripted differently, things go differently. An offensive lineman would have helped. A defensive lineman would have helped. I mean, anybody would have given
quarterback
a chance than a 3rd string guy who didn't even suit up.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm trying to, and see the premise behind everybody's argument who defends Jordan Love. I want Jordan Love to be the next Joe Montana. I want him to be the next Aaron Rodgers. I don't have anything against Jordan Love. It just wasn't a good pick at the time. They had the opportunity to put pieces on that team to win a Super Bowl right now. And if Jordan Love doesn't end up winning a Super Bowl, if he ends up being a bust or if he ends up being a mediocre player for 8 to 10 years, how are you going to look back on the 2020 NFL draft? Are you going to look back and say, well, that was worth it?
And that's what drives me nuts about the pick. And I'm with both of you because, again, you got Aaron freaking Rodgers on your team and you don't have him for much longer. I mean, contract wise and age wise. I mean, he said it before. I think last year he sees, the back 9 of his career already. What are you doing right now? Like Bart said, you're playing, well, do we want him? I don't know. This is cool. Let's just extend and restructure everybody else, but your highest paid player. My issue is that, like what you said, Rhino, 10 years, from now, we're going to look back and be like, man, Jordan Love, who, I hope he works out. I hope he's great. Nothing against the guy. He's better at his job than I am at mine. And I have no hard feelings towards him. But you got Aaron freaking Rodgers. Do everything you can right now. I don't care about the future right now. I care about right now. You have the best quarterback to ever play the game. And people will argue that. That's fine. In my opinion, he's the best to ever play, talent-wise. Do everything you can now. Win now. Worry about that stuff later. Plug and play with certain guys. Draft and develop certain people. Build up your depth. But my goodness, win now, not only for Rodgers because he deserves it, because you put him in an NFC Championship game with Darius Gunner as his number 1 cornerback before. Do everything you can for that guy now because he's taken the franchise to places. I know Favre, had his success as well, but the longevity that Rodgers has had, 3-time MVP, all kinds of accolades. I don't need to tell you guys this. Do everything you can now. Worry about the future later.
Nobody ever walks into week 1 of the NFL season and says, man, I can't wait until we win the Super Bowl 8 years from now.
Exactly.
No one's ever said that when they tuned into a game. They say, man, I hope we win the Super Bowl this year. So
and that's all
Brandon's
that matters.
100% right.
Yeah, it's all that matters. And I get very upset about it. And you go on Twitter, you go on, as Ryan Horvat likes to call it, and Bart knows this, the dark web, the dark world. And, everybody's an expert and everything, but what you got now is you're not ever going to have a better quarterback. You might, that's kind of a stupid comment, but maybe it's not. You might not ever see. Yeah. You might not ever see, as if Jordan Love goes to 10 Pro Bowls, he's still not going to be better than Rodgers. And you have that person in your locker room right now under contract for 3 more years. Do everything you can now to win.
I think, and planning for the future is good. Planning for the future is a good thing to do, but you have to balance, what does it cost you in the present? I try to compare it to, well, let's say I want to plan for a retirement and I want to, not have to work when I'm 65 and I want to be able to enjoy a little bit. All right. So do you make some sacrifices now? Do you buy a new car that you don't need, or do you buy a used reliable car? You make some sacrifices, but one thing you don't do is just not have a car, if you don't need one, or you buy like a rickshaw and have a guy carry you around town. You still need something in the present. You want a nice house later, so you don't like live without a roof here in 2021, so you can have a nice house in 2055. So that the issue I think with the Love pick is, well, there's a million of them, but that pick, and it is unfair to him. I mean, he didn't ask to get drafted by Green Bay. He was as surprised as everybody else. And I think any Packer fan is going to root for him once he takes over. It's just, well, when are you rooting for him to take over? I don't want him to take over soon, because that means Rodgers isn't the quarterback, and Rodgers is a good quarterback to this day. I mean, he won the MVP. So he's still very, very capable. I'd rather have that than a guy that we're not sure of yet. So they borrowed against the present for the future. And that's why whatever Love does unfairly, I do think he's going to have to make up for what they lost now and then have his own achievements. And they really, I mean, when they won the Super Bowl, it's not a definitive, but I think, they draft another guy, and they could have, at least they would have given you the impression that they are trying for this year. And I think that's where it's just, like with anything, you gotta plan for the future, but also care about the present. Packers totally punted the present. And then you've got your quarterback and your whole team. I mean, they're trying to figure out, well, what does this mean? I mean, are we totally into it? What's the direction here? It's a very fine line that Gutekunst and LaFleur, but more Goody, tried to thread there. And if it works, I mean, the ceiling is so great, but 99 times out of 100, you're going to have this mess, which is what the Packers are in right now.
Yeah. And I mean, one final follow-up comment before we move on to the next segment. I think you're entirely right by making the financial analogy there. They're really spending poorly. I mean, you're investing too much into the future by not putting anything into the present. And I mean, you really do go without now in hopes that your tomorrow will be better. And I just don't think that's the greatest philosophy to go forward with. Moving on to the next segment, we're going to talk about Joe Barry and what our expectations are of the new defensive coordinator in Green Bay. We've really had some turmoil at that particular position over the last 10 to 12 years. A lot of expectations with Mike Pettin. Really thought he was going to put us over the edge. Didn't. Same thing with Dom Capers. Dom Capers was great the first couple of years in Green Bay, and then really just fell off of a cliff. So there are a lot of question marks surrounding Joe Barry. Now he's had his question marks in the past, and he's had his successes in the past. He was with Washington for a couple of years as DC. They made the playoffs one year. They were really towards the bottom of the list in terms of statistics. Same thing with Detroit. 0-16, really not much has to be said about that. But his tenure as a position coordinator, as linebackers coach, I mean, he was with Tampa Bay from 01 to 06. They were the number one defense in the NFL across those 5 years in terms of yards per game and points per game. He coached Derek Brooks. He coached Corey Littleton to a Pro Bowl in Los Angeles. So, Bart, what are your expectations of Joe Barry and what he's going to be able to do with the personnel he has around him?
I think, they kind of didn't do him any favors with what they're bringing him into it. You look at the last guys you mentioned, Dom Capers had a track record of success. Mike Philbin, we were excited, or Mike Pettin. When you leave, it's like you forget Joe Philbin, Mike Patton. Remember when Joe Philbin challenged 2 plays on the first drive of a game?
Yeah.
Mike Patton, he had a track record and he was a coach. Joe Barry, he kind of just popped up on the average fan's radar. I didn't know a lot about Joe Barry. And then you dig in and you're like, oh, wow, this guy's, captained some units. I mean, the sheet you just listed on his accomplishments, I mean, you had to dig deep. Who cares about Corey Littleton, Pro Bowl? Who cares? How did he do as a coordinator? He did bad. He had bad defenses, right?
But I mean, the big question mark with those teams were the personnel. I mean, he had nobody in Detroit and
True.
Question marks in Washington. So now he does at least have a little bit of personnel. The Smith brothers, Jair Alexander, Kenny Clark.
Oh yeah, it's better. It's better now. I'm not making fun of you for your research. I'm just saying, on a guy like Joe Barry, you have to do research. He's not known. He's not known for one thing really, other than Derek Brooks, maybe. But so he comes in here, but no other changes were made. The defense is the exact same. The coordinators are the exact same. Every other position, I should say, the position coaches, they're the exact same. So you're gonna be able to tell, is this guy better than Mike Pettin right away, or is he not? And I guess if he's the difference, if you think, and based on track record, I don't know how you would, but if you fire Mike Pettin and say, this guy is going to do the same stuff, but better with the same guys, then it'll work out. But it doesn't seem like they did him any favors, because if anything goes wrong, what's the one difference? Joe Barry. Now, if anything goes right, then you're going to credit Joe Barry. But if anything goes wrong, it's not, it's still Will Redmond and Shannon Sullivan, to pick on them again, or it's still Kevin King, or the position coaches are the same. Everything is the same. Pretty much this whole team is the same. They just felt like, well, we got to do something. We got to do one thing. Let's fire the coordinator. Then they're like, well, who should we hire? Oh, crap. Joe Barry deserves a 9th chance. So then they bring in Joe Barry over here. And now the Packers have to, this is it. This is the change they made. So good luck. But they're, you would think, and should Pettin have even been fired? Matt LaFleur trusted him with his defense more than he trusted Rodgers on 4th down. So now you're firing that guy?
Good point.
Was that really the problem? If anything, the problem was Kevin King. He had 2 terrible plays. You brought him back. So what's the level of determination here? I almost don't think they should have fired him.
I would like to know,
what did he do wrong? What did Pettin do that Joe Barry can't?
I think Pettin's big downfall, and LaFleur kind of alluded to it, was his communication on the field and through the headset. I don't think LaFleur was a big fan of.
LaFleur, you could tell from the minute they met.
Yeah. I don't think he even wanted him to begin with in the first place. I think he was kind of married into that.
I was shocked that he stayed when LaFleur took over. I was shocked that Pettin stayed, because Pettin was a Mike McCarthy hire.
Mm-hmm.
So I was shocked when Mike McCarthy, or when LaFleur kept him. But the question that I want to ask, and I don't think we'll ever get an answer to it, Joe Barry obviously wasn't the number 1 choice in Green Bay. It was Jim Leonard out of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
They offered Jim Leonard the job and then waited for him to say no. And the moment he said no, I kind of felt like Matt LaFleur was like, oh shit. I know Joe. Call up Joe. See what he's doing. See what he's got going on. That was the feeling that I got when they hired Joe, because they obviously worked together in Los Angeles. So do they know something that we don't know, looking from the outside in? Because like Bart alluded to, it's the exact same team. What is Barry going to offer to this team that's any different than what Pettin was doing last year?
And to kind of go off of that point you just made, Ryan, it is the same defense. And I'm okay with that, because they were the number 9 defense last year. A couple plays change in an NFC Championship game, the Kevin King, and a lot of people give Kevin King a lot of crap for that play at halftime, or right before half, and rightfully so. Will Redmond dropped a duck from Tom Brady that would have sent it into halftime without a score. So they're plays, I think, not players, away from going to that Super Bowl last year. And maybe we'll see what happens this year. But I'm okay with that same defense because they were the number 9 defense. You have arguably 3 players, maybe even 4, that are the top at their position. You know, Kenny Clark, Jair Alexander. Maybe you could argue Zadarius Smith as an edge rusher. Darnell Savage is coming around. So they're not bad as far as players. I think it's just a few plays.
You know, and one thing I can't even believe I'm about to say this, but one thing I will give Kevin King credit for, that play call, the final play call on that Tom Brady touchdown to end the first half. What are you doing? Why are you worried about protecting sideline to sideline? Worry about protecting the end zone. They had one safety deep, and that was it.
I don't even know if there was a safety. I'm not even sure if there was.
Of course they're going deep.
Yeah.
I mean, who didn't see that coming? Even if it is 45, 49, 58-year-old Tom Brady, of course he's going to try and hit the end zone. So, I mean, Brandon might make a point there. I mean, it could potentially be the play calling and not the players, but I mean, Bart makes a great point. What is it that Barry is bringing to the table that Pettin didn't?
I'm still mad at Kevin King for jumping 10
15 minutes before he should have. Yeah.
That was another, and that's kind of, Bart, that's kind of what I'm going off of, because if you rewatch that game, you know, and I don't disagree totally with you with like, what do you gain from from Pettin to Barry? I mean, we don't know yet. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we don't know. It's just he's got it
right, that you got to feel it out and play the year. But I mean, really though, if you go back, because I rewatched it more than I should have, and it's a handful of plays that make the difference. I mean. And then again, but on the flip side, you had 3 straight turnovers in that second half. So then now Aaron Rodgers has got to do something, and Matt LaFleur's got to do something on the offensive side of the ball. You can't go 3 straight 3-and-outs when you have 3 turnovers. So, you know, you can go back and forth with either one. I was 100% on Jim Leonhard. I mean, when it came out, I was like super excited. I honestly thought it was a shoe-in. I know he's probably lined up for bigger things, maybe. But I was really excited for Jim Leonhard. Then, yeah, Joe Barry just feels like, well, here we go. Like, let's just plug it in somewhere because I used to work with him. I don't want to take anything away from Joe Barry. You know, I don't think that he's had a fair run at a defensive coordinator, but the teams that he's been on, I had to do a lot of research as well, like Bart said, because you didn't really know much about him. So I did a little bit of digging. He only had 3 total players the entire time he was a defensive coordinator in Washington and Detroit. Only 3 players that made a Pro Bowl, and they didn't make the Pro Bowl when he was there. Just 3: Ryan Kerrigan, Cliff Averill, and Shawn Rogers. So he's coming onto a defense that, you know, Joe Barry got his name from coaching linebackers. You got 2 really young linebackers in Green Bay who might have a bright future: Chris Barnes, Kamal Martin. So you get excited about that because you're like, okay. He's coached up Tampa Bay's linebackers, coached up what's the team? The Rams, who didn't prioritize linebackers at all. I mean, those were all coached up guys, whether it was, you know, Staley or Barry, you know, whoever it was. I mean, they were coached up. They weren't big draft picks. So you get excited about that. Okay. Chris Barnes, Kamal Martin, really high potential with both of them. Maybe Barry comes in here and lights a fire into them, coaches them up to be, you know, really good or at least pretty decent. So I want to give him a year to figure it out. Preston Smith arguably had his best year under Joe Barry in Washington. I believe it was his rookie year. So there's a lot to look forward to. You kind of fall back and I see where Bart's saying, you know, it's the same team. So you're not going to know if it was Barry or Pettin or the players, but I think coaching, although it's very important, I think it gets overhyped a lot because these are plays, not players, that are not having the Green Bay Packers in the Super Bowl. Handful of plays defensively and offensively, and they probably beat Kansas City. So I'm excited for this year because we are running it back. You have that feeling like this is the last, as of now, the last shot with Rodgers that you might have. And you're running it back with the whole team. So I think the easy thing is to just let Joe Barry see what he is. Obviously, it wasn't LaFleur's first choice. We all know he wanted Jim Leonhard. He offered him the job, obviously. So I guess we'll see. It's a big question mark. But again, they got the pieces on that defense. I mean, they got really good players on that defense. We'll see what happens in the draft. I still think they go after the draft and possibly get maybe a Richard Sherman, maybe a Casey Hayward, some an aged cornerback, but maybe a veteran presence. Hopefully they get, address some of those needs in the first or second round. And we know that we don't know what they're going to do in the first round off of last year. So
speaking of that, Bart, what do you think the Packers can do in the first round to make his job better?
Well, I think cornerback is where I'm looking at. If you've got the same group back, that's fine, but you do need another good quarterback that's going to be across from Jair. And that's one of the things I realized this last year is if you have a great cornerback, unless you have a good second cornerback, it's almost a hindrance.
Mm-hmm.
In a weird, messed up way. If you have a all-pro cornerback, you're just not going to throw over there. So your other guys need to be good because they're going to get a lot more attention than on any other team. If you just got two average guys, they're each going to get picked on. One guy can step up, but when you've got Jair, nobody wants to throw over to Jair. He's amazing. So then you got to be good on the other side. So corner, it will be interesting because just on everything that I've done with the draft right now, there's 4, maybe a 5th guy that they could be top 20 guys. And then the next batch of quarterbacks is probably talent value 50 to 65. So the Packers are in like a no man's land where if you could sit at 29 and hope one of these guys fall to you, and that'd be great. Otherwise, you can reach on a guy and all right, I guess. I mean, you still need a guy, but are you getting the right value? I think if they've got a corner that they like, then you might have to see them trade up. And I hope they do. I hope they do trade up. Goody will trade up. He's traded up a bunch of times. He'll trade up, and they've got enough picks. They don't need to stockpile picks. They got pretty much the whole team back. What do you need 10 plus picks for? What do you need? Like when you bring back the Will Redmonds and all these guys, even Funchess is coming back. All these guys are coming back. You want them for a reason. You don't have like a ton of holes to fill position wise. You draft better guys, sure, but you've got the skeleton of a team there. So I would like to see them use picks as assets and trade up. And right now I'm at cornerback. They could use another linebacker, I suppose. There's some good ones that could be there end of the first round, but I think corner is the pressing need. And this is a need now for the future, but also the present. So it should appease everybody in this draft. Last year I wanted receiver, didn't go with receiver. I wanted, like last year I wanted receiver. I would have appreciated one in the first round, but I just wanted a receiver. No, none. Not even one. Not one guy, 7th round, no. So this year I think it's got to be corner for me. I was kind of on the running back train, but then Jones got brought back. They could go offensive line. I mean, there's a lot that they could do, and you'd say, yeah, all right. But I think corner is the spot they got to go.
Who's your guy? Who's the one that you've mocked that you would like to see go to Green Bay more than anybody?
Well, just based on who might be there, Newsome out of Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
But I was talking to Peter Bukowski last week, Locked On Packers, and he's got a couple other names that he likes. I know like Surtain and Horn, and those guys will probably be gone. Asante Samuel's interesting because he looked like a 2nd or 3rd round guy, but then draft season, all these guys like rise up. I don't know how.
He plays a lot like Jair, and I know he's been quoted as saying that's who he wants to be like. So that'd be interesting.
If he's there at 29, that's who they take. I think.
Yeah.
A lot of us will feel pretty good about that. So
for sure.
Like throw him in the top 5. I want a top 5 guy, and they might have to trade up to do that. So I'm totally on board them trading up. If they trade down, put me in a coma for a year. Wake me up.
I may not watch the rest of the draft if they trade out of the first round.
I'm worried about because like that's kind of what I'm worried about, because on the show we were talking about maybe doing a draft show, and I'm like, well, like Bart said, you bring back Will Redmond, Chandon Sullivan. What are you going to do? What is it? 29? Like, is the value going to be there? And if it's not there, then it's a real possibility. And I would not be shocked at all.
You know what? I would pack Kevin King's bags if they packaged him in a trade package with a couple picks to move up into the top 20. I'll pack your stuff for you. Don't worry about it.
Go get Kyle Pitts. Come on, make everybody happy.
Yeah. Okay.
This draft, this honestly, and I was with Bart last year. I wanted a receiver in the first round, like without a doubt. This receiver class might be just as good as last year's. So I mean, maybe we'll see.
Yeah, but see, and this is the really funny thing. Now the wide receiver position is no longer a position of absolute dire need.
They need a slot guy. They need a slot guy.
The development of Lazard, the development of MBS, and with MLF's system, he doesn't really use that gadget slot guy the way Mike McCarthy did. So, going out and getting a slot receiver may not be a position of need now. I mean, that could be a draft for the future style of pick. So that would be our luck. We begged for a wide receiver last year when we think they need one. They don't take one. They obviously don't need one now, and they go out and get one in the first round. So
with them not taking last thing on the draft, with them not taking receiver last year, that hurt. The fact that Minnesota got the one player that I've wanted more than anybody in the last 10 years in Justin Jefferson.
The guy that Rodgers name dropped too.
That hurt. Exactly. And I know Horvey was on that boat with, was my number one. I can look back like 10 years. I wanted him so freaking bad. And then when you see Minnesota pick him, you're like, was it like 4 spots ahead of us? I'm like, all right.
I couldn't believe he dropped. I thought Jefferson was going in the top 15 for sure. But yeah, so the draft is a crapshoot every year for us. So we'll have to wait and see. We're going to move on to the last segment of the show. And this one's going to be an interesting one because I'm pretty excited to talk about this. We're going to talk about both Sterling Sharpe and Leroy Butler. It's an annual conversation for Packers fans. Should they be in the Hall of Fame? Why aren't they in the Hall of Fame? We're going to start with Sterling Sharpe. And his case is a little bit more peculiar than Butler's. Butler is an obvious one. Butler obviously should be in. He's the only member of the all-90s decade team that's not in the Hall of Fame. Sterling Sharpe, though, if you look at the first 7 years of some of the greatest wide receivers of all time, Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Calvin Johnson, he's right there statistically with them. He's got more receptions, yards, and touchdowns than Terrell Owens did in his first 7 seasons. Rice, Moss, and Johnson are ahead in yards, but they're right there in receptions. And Sterling Sharpe is a little bit behind in touchdowns. You have to remember, a lot of these guys played with either Pro Bowl level or Hall of Fame level quarterbacks their entire careers. Sterling Sharpe played 4 years with nobodies, average guys. He didn't have Brett Favre until the final 3 years of his career. And that's really when his career started to take off in Green Bay as well. 108, 112 receptions, leading the league with 18 touchdowns. Bart, what's your case for Sterling Sharpe making it to the Hall of Fame?
I obviously want him to get in. When I grew up, my brother and I, we would always buy Packer stuff, and he would always get the Favre stuff, and I'd always ask for the Sterling stuff. I mean, Sterling was amazing. He's my guy, and then he gets hurt. You look at like with Calvin Johnson getting in a shorter career, which he kind of decided on. And you're seeing, maybe if you see these guys retire earlier, like Andrew Luck's going to retire, or he did retire early. And who was the guy out of San Francisco? Was it Borland?
Yeah, he only played 1 year.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's not in the Hall of Fame. But okay, so Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck, I think, is a better quarterback ever than Phillip Rivers was.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Phillip Rivers is going to make the Hall of Fame, whether I think he should or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because longevity. He played for a long time, had a good level of success. I still don't understand how he can throw the football with that style, but he's going to be in the Hall of Fame. So like longevity sometimes can help you, but I thought Eli Manning was starting to play himself out of the Hall of Fame towards the end of his career. Kurt Warner had an interesting career, but they put him in the Hall of Fame right away. Like, oh, no brainer, Kurt Warner, he'll go in. I think that's Sharpe because careers might be shorter, where he was not thought of at all because his career was too short. You just wrote him off right away. But when you look back, you're right. What he did on those teams, how impactful he was, his stats right up there. Maybe you do look back at that one. It's like he was a Hall of Fame talent. Yes, he was. Did he play long enough to have a Hall of Fame career? And I think that's what people are going to have to decide as they go forward here. I would put him in. I would put Leroy in before him, but I would put Sharpe in it. If you're going to start doing shorter careers, I mean, you gotta account for, well, Sharpe Sharp couldn't play, you know. It's not like he walked away from the game as these guys are now. He couldn't play. So I don't know. That's tough. I always think the Hall of Fame should be, what I say is, like when I imagine taking my son when he grows up, and I go through Cooperstown, I go through Canton, I want to be able to tell him pretty much like the story of the game. And these were all the impactful players of my youth. And, you know, growing up here in my 30s, I don't want to like get in the car and say, all right, well, there was also Sterling Sharp. And now I have to tell you about, you know, with baseball, now I got to tell you about Pete Rose. He had 4,000 hits. Well, 4,000 hits. Why isn't he on the Fame? Because he bet on his team to win. You know, so I think the Hall of Fame, like Kurt Schilling, I don't agree with things he says, but he's a Hall of Fame player. So I think the Hall of Fame should be like OJ. He was a Hall of Fame player. If you're going to have a Hall of Fame there, but that's the problem with the Hall of Fame is there's no real requirements.
Mm-hmm.
There are, but also there's not. Like it's a bunch of writers sitting in a room debating with each other how they feel about it. And I think steroid guys in baseball should be in the Hall of Fame. Maybe you don't, that's fine. But when they get there's no rule that says they should be or shouldn't be. It's just a bunch of randos talking about it. And that's how you're in the Hall of Fame. If I'm on those committees, I'll say yes to Sterling Sharp. Eventually, Leroy needs to be in before him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as far as Sterling is concerned too, the thing that I question is, you know, Gale Sayers did not have a very long career in Chicago either. He played back in the 40s, 50s. I think his career was 8 or 9 years at the most. Might have been shorter than that. So I question, what did Gale do in his time with Chicago that Sterling didn't do with his time in Green Bay? I mean, he obviously was top 3 wide receiver in the league pretty much every year he played. The statistics back him up. Obviously, the point that you made, you know, he was forced out of the game. He didn't walk away from the game. What does a player have to do in that short of a time span to prove that he is Hall of Fame worthy? I mean, Brandon, what are your thoughts on Sterling Sharp?
Yeah, this is another one I did a little bit of research on, because I'm a homer. I don't really care to admit it. I want Sterling Sharp in the Hall of Fame. I think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. So I did a little bit of researching, you know, looking at receivers that are already in the Hall of Fame. And I mean, obviously Leroy Butler speaks for himself. That's honestly a joke. And shame on Pro Football Hall of Fame writers or whoever you are. Shame on you. But Sterling Sharp, I looked at his numbers and I threw up a Twitter poll on my personal Twitter just to kind of get it was a pretty easy poll if you looked at it. Sterling Sharp played 112 games, 65 touchdowns, over 8,000 receiving yards. Okay, 7 years. That's pretty darn good, especially when the only 3 of them you had with a good quarterback. So then I went down the list and I looked at a couple other people, and most of them were deserving, not taking anything away from any of them. But then I pulled up Lynn Swann and I said, okay, let me see what he played with the Hall of Fame quarterback. He played with the best defense for multiple years as a receiver in Pittsburgh. So I looked up at his stats. He played just as many games. He actually played 4 more games than Sterling Sharp, played 116 games. He had 51 touchdowns and just over 5,000 yards. Well, what's the difference? He only played 9 years. Sterling Sharp played 7, had to walk away because of an injury. Lynn Swann walked away. What's the difference? What are we basing this Hall of Fame vote on? Because Lynn Swann played on a Super Bowl winning team with Bradshaw and Franco Harris and that Steelers defense. So now he gets in just because of that. Well, then why did it take Jerry Kramer 20, 30, 40 years to get in? So I'm with Bart. What is the basis? What are we doing? What are we like? It's honestly a joke. Right. There is
no. Rules are made up. Jerry Kramer didn't get in because some writers felt they put in too many Packers from that time.
Right.
They're penalizing Jerry Kramer for being on a good team, but then in your case with Swann, they're giving him the benefit for being on a good team.
Exactly. And
Swann's a guy who had a career afterwards where he was visible.
Right.
John Lynch, like we all know Leroy Butler. I mean, I work with the guy. We know him around here in Wisconsin. Everyone knows Leroy Butler here. Nationally, John Lynch is more known because he was on Fox for 10 years and then now he's a GM of a team. And what does that do? Well, it gets you in circles. You give these writers a little insight. Oh yeah, what? And they subconsciously want to vote for you. So there's a political aspect to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no there. We think there is, but there is none. There is no flatline qualification. Like in baseball, we say, "Oh, yeah, a pitcher's got to have 300 wins." No, he
3,000
doesn't.
strikeouts. Yeah.
He doesn't
Yeah.
though. It's something that you think you can go on, but
Right.
he does. It's as made up as the WWE Hall of Fame, where they're just like, "Well, who's going to give the best speech that year?" Who
That's what's
recently died that we want to celebrate. I mean, it's all made up.
That's
and
what's
it gives
frustrating.
you the illusion that it's not, but it is. It's all fake. It's all scam.
I mean, again, I'm biased, and I wasn't, I was a kid growing up, with Sterling Sharp and Leroy Butler. But if you take away, watching them play and you just look at what you have, factual information in front of you, numbers, his numbers, we'll get into Leroy, and that don't even need to be discussed, but we're going to get into it. I mean, if you got guys like Lynn Swann, why isn't Sterling Sharp in? I mean, he played with nobodies until Favre, and he only played with Favre for what, 3 years? And he's one of only 6 players in the NFL, in the history of the NFL, to win the triple crown of the NFL. They're receiving touchdowns, receiving yards, and receptions. So what's the difference? That's what, and I know it's a question, rhetorical question, and it's not ever going to get answered because the Pro Football Hall of Fame is incompetent, in my opinion. But in my opinion, he absolutely deserves to be in. Even his brother, Shannon, who's also in the Hall of Fame, goes out publicly, says Sterling was the better player, bar none. I mean,
best Hall of Fame speech ever.
Yeah. And Sterling Sharp just goes completely under the radar because of his injury. And you got guys that left the game, Phillip Rivers, Andrew Luck, you probably won't get in, but that left the game on their own, Calvin Johnson, and Sterling Sharp was forced to because of an unusual neck injury. And his numbers are still better than guys that are in the Hall of Fame. It's really cut and dry. So yeah, he should be in.
In the NFL Hall of Fame, to add insult to injury, if you're a finalist, they make you sit in a hotel room for a knock on the door. And everybody that's ever done that, I mean, Leroy's got his story where there's somebody knocking on the door. I think it was Antonio Freeman.
It was
something. It's like, what kind of twisted?
Yeah.
Like, what are they doing? So I don't know if that has anything to do with anything. I hate that.
And there was actually an article, moving on to Leroy Butler now, there was an article that I read earlier when I was doing my research for this particular segment. One of the things that pushed John Lynch, outside of the fact that his face was in the public, the limelight a lot more than Leroy Butler's was, is the fact that he was a finalist 8 times. And Leroy's only been a finalist, I believe, twice now.
A joke.
And I looked at that. I think about that. I'm like, what kind of logic is that? So you're basically just, all right, here, you can have it. Fine. That way we don't have to think about you anymore. Like, what does that even mean? Leroy Butler's career, top to bottom, was better than John Lynch's in every aspect. I mean, he was a 3-way safety. He could play up in blitz. He could play the run better. He could play coverage better. John Lynch was a box safety. He took care of one portion of the field, and that was it. He's got less interceptions. He's less all-pro selections. He was never a part of any all-decade first or second team. But yet he's in before Leroy Butler. And I believe Bart is 100% correct. It's all politics. It's all, kissing babies and having conversations when we're actually not looking at the product that was put on the field over the duration of their career.
Like, I remember, so being a kid and watching football and collecting cards. The 2 cards I collected for safeties a bunch was Leroy and then Steve Atwater. I really liked, and so I believe he got in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Atwater got in, which I would have liked them to get in at the same time. Atwater's deserving for sure, because they played like they were safeties that played. Leroy's coming up and getting sacks. This is not what you see out of a safety. It was it changed the position. It was so great to see. And I always remember, and I told Leroy this, it was him, Reggie, and Favre. They were on that, like Favre and Reggie were on another level, but Leroy was on that level.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he might have been like the third of the 3, but he was on that level. He was that, and then it was everybody else. John Lynch, I mean, Derek Brooks was better, and Warren Sapp was better, and that whole unit was like, he was a guy that made it up, you know, good for him. But John Lynch was like, he was good. And maybe he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame someday. But I think over Leroy Butler is such a joke because it shows you that there's more than they're voting on than just, you know, the career. And I just, in the moment, I never, like, you watch Leroy, Packer fan or not, you watch Leroy and you think, well, this is the Hall of Famer. I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You watch John Lynch and you're like, I never felt that ever. So that, you know, it's just, again, there's politicking in it. Yeah. We gave this guy 8 chances, so let's put him in. Well, we're the ones that gave him. And so Leroy's getting penalized because he was already getting penalized. What logic is that?
Well, the one thing that I always compare in this argument too, when it comes to John Lynch and Leroy Butler, is John Lynch played on one of the greater defenses the game has ever seen. He had that help that boosted him to be better. Now, yes, the Packers had some good defenses in the 90s. I think in 96, they had the number 1 overall defense, but that wasn't a historical defense. That wasn't
But
an
also
all-time
Leroy
defense.
Made that defense.
And that's exactly what, yeah.
Better because the defense allowed him to be.
That's exactly the point that I make is Leroy was probably the number 1 factor in the mid 90s for the Packers defense being what it was. John Lynch's, you know, his statistical output, his play was elevated by those around him, not because of him.
Yeah.
So when I look at him being in the Hall of Fame over Leroy Butler, I think it's a sham. And the biggest one is the fact that Leroy Butler's an all 90s first team, all decade player, and he's the only one from that decade that's not in. Usually when you're on those teams before you retire or when you retire, it's a precursor to becoming a Hall of Famer. You know, you don't usually see guys on the all decade team that don't make the Hall of Fame. So yeah, I think it's time to get Butler in. I think next year will probably be the year. There was a lot of big name guys on this ballot this year, and now that Leroy is a 2-time finalist, I think next year he'll be a finalist again, and I think next year will probably be his year.
I would hope so. And I kind of look at, you know, not to bore anybody, but I kind of look at the numbers again. And if you don't watch them, and obviously we've watched Leroy and I listen to him every day. Bart works with him. But you just look at, like, Bart was alluded to Steve Atwater, and nothing against Steve Atwater, Hall of Fame worthy. Sure. He played almost the same amount of games as Leroy Butler, and he had 5 sacks and 24 interceptions. Leroy had 4 times the amount of sacks and 14 more interceptions, roughly the same amount of games. And I look at somebody like Brian Dawkins. Brian Dawkins is in the Hall of Fame. Great. Good for you. He played in 44 more games than Leroy Butler did in his career, and they have identical numbers. So it's a travesty. It's a joke. John Lynch doesn't even need to be talked about anymore because he's the only reason he got into the Hall of Fame. And I get angry about this topic because
me too.
Leroy is, aside from being like one of the nicest, awesome individuals you'll probably ever run into, and I haven't ran into him. I know Bart does all the time, but just listening to him, what he does in with his free time and what he does for, you know, as a person. But when you watch him play, like Brian Dawkins played a Hall of Fame career because of Leroy Butler. Yeah. It wasn't because Brian Dawkins, he had the talent. I'm not taking that away from him, but
he didn't change the game the way
he didn't change. Leroy Butler changed. I mean, just turn on that Super Bowl. Look at against the Patriots in 96 or 97, whatever year, January of whatever. And just watch the way he's playing at the line of scrimmage, the way he's blitzing, the way he's covering. John Lynch couldn't do that. Steve Atwater, obviously, you have 5 sacks and Leroy Butler's got over 20. I mean, it's honestly, it's really terrible. And in the Hall of Fame, we already went over, you know, the voting and the process and how dumb it is. But it's honestly pretty upsetting to be the only player in the all 90s team. And it's going to turn into another Jerry Kramer type thing. Maybe, I hope to God it doesn't go as long as Jerry Kramer. I thought this was the year. I think Leroy made jokes about it. He's the 2020, draft class. I thought last year would have been the year, but he definitely deserves to be in. If Brian Dawkins is in, and if John Lynch is in, and Steve Atwater's in, why not Leroy Butler? His numbers are better or on par with all of these guys that are in. And he changed the way the game is played, and he absolutely deserves to be in.
Bart, quick plug. Have you had any of his liquor?
Yeah, I got some in the cabinet now. Leaf vodka. It's good.
What would you compare it to?
I don't see when I had it, I almost I couldn't taste, and this is why it's good because I mixed it with something and it didn't taste all vodka-y.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Because the vodka that I grow up drinking is Fleischmann's and
Oh, God.
You got that handle on it for $10.
The typical up north vodka. Yeah.
so Leroy's, it's like a good smooth vodka. It's I mean, I don't know, is it top shelf? Hell yeah, it is. It's Leroy Butler's vodka. He ain't gonna put out a bad product. Leave vodka at a grocer near you. Leroy, if you want to see Leroy, look at that. There it is.
I got the
Leroy at a
autograph.
Pick and Save right now.
I was going to say, if you go to Pick and Save, he has his own section, and he has on top of the own section, he has the own spot with the autographed bottles. And I won't open this one because it's autographed, and he is going to get into the Hall of Fame.
There we go.
All right, gents. It is 1:00. It is officially time to call it a day. Just got to get a quick plug to our sponsor, One Call Technology. One Call Technology's senior staff has 100 plus years of excellence in virtually every aspect of business communications, business phone systems installation and service, managed telecom service provider, telecom carrier management, and high-speed internet. Give them a call, 888-585-8850. Tell them that we sent you for all of your business technology needs. Bart, thank you so much for joining the podcast. Once again, you can find Bart on Twitter at WinksThinks. He is a part of the Bart Winkler Show on 1250 AM. Also, Brandon at Wisco_Brandon and myself at Sports Talk Rhino, and of course the podcast at Titletown Lounge. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, especially you, Bart, and have a great Sunday.
Thank you, Bart.
Appreciate it. Go.
Go, Pack, go. All right, so we're officially done recording. Bart, my man, thank you so much, dude. We appreciate you. We'd love to have you back on after the draft, break down the draft picks and maybe give a little season preview going into minicamp. Maybe sometime
as long as we don't have another quarterback in the first round.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about the draft then.
If we get